On December 23, 2024, a Russian cargo ship tried to do something that no longer works in modern warfare: move strategic military cargo in secret. No AIS, falsified manifests, multiple name changes, a so-called ghost ship. Within hours, it was on the seabed of the Mediterranean. Its route mapped, its cargo exposed, its mission understood. The sinking of Ursa Major didn't just destroy a ship, it destroyed a myth. The myth that you can hide logistics in the age of satellites, persistent radar, and networked intelligence. Because in modern warfare, invisibility isn't a technology anymore. It's a liability. Let me show you why ghost ships can't survive modern ISR, and why the navies that still believe in secrecy over protection are already losing the next war. December 23, 2024. The Mediterranean Sea between Spain and Algeria. A 142-meter Russian cargo ship suddenly loses speed, lists to starboard, and sinks within hours after multiple explosions tear through its hull. 14 crew members escape. 2 disappear. And Spanish investigators discover something the ship's manifest never mentioned: 2 VM-4SG nuclear reactor housings, likely destined for North Korea, hidden among declared port cranes and empty containers. This is the Ursa Major. Russia called it their flagship logistics vessel. The West called it part of Russia's shadow fleet, and its sinking reveals a brutal truth about modern naval warfare. Ghost ships don't exist anymore. You cannot hide strategic cargo, you cannot mask your route, and you cannot assume that secrecy makes you safe. Because in an era of satellite surveillance, synthetic aperture radar, and networked intelligence sharing, every ship broadcasts its presence whether it wants to or not. Let me show you why the concept of the ghost ship died long before the Ursa Major did, and what this sinking reveals about logistics warfare and peer competition. The Ursa Major operated exactly how Russia thought modern strategic transport should work: covert routes, falsified manifests, and deliberate obscurity. The ship was part of Russia's shadow fleet and took an unusual route from St. Petersburg to Vladivostok through the Mediterranean. Though the ship's manifest listed only empty containers and port equipment, aerial images revealed 2 large, undeclared containers at the stern. Those containers, Spanish authorities later confirmed, were nuclear reactor housings, strategic cargo Russia was attempting to smuggle to North Korea in violation of international sanctions. Think about the operational security Russia believed it had. The ship's IMO number was 9538892, and her MMSI number was 273396130. Multiple name changes over the years: Scan Britannia, Hyundai Britannia, EIT Palmina, Sparta 3, and finally Ursa Major. Registration shifted from Isle of Man to Germany to Antigua and Barbuda to Belize to Russia. By 2019, the Russian military logistics company Oberon Logistica was managing her, and by 2024, she was registered in Novorossiysk. Every change designed to obscure ownership, confuse tracking, and create plausible deniability, and none of it worked. Because modern intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance doesn't care about name changes or flag registrations. Satellites tracked the ship from St. Petersburg. Spanish authorities recorded a sudden course change and loss of propulsion on December 22nd, followed by a distress signal on December 23rd. Aerial surveillance identified the undeclared cargo before the ship even sank. And within days of the incident, investigators had reconstructed the entire route, identified the cargo, and determined its likely destination. This is what ghost ship actually means in modern warfare: a vessel that thinks it's invisible, but leaves a data trail across every sensor domain. Spain concluded the shipment was headed for the North Korean port of Racine, which lacks the infrastructure to handle such cargo without specialized cranes, also found on board. Intelligence didn't just detect the ship, they understood its mission, identified its cargo, and predicted its destination, all while the vessel was still operational. The sinking itself reveals how vulnerable strategic transport has become. According to TASS, there was an explosion in her engine room. Russian state media RIA Novosti said the incident was caused by a terrorist attack and involved 3 explosions on the starboard side of ship. Spanish rescuers observed hull damage on the hull of the sinking ship consistent with a torpedo strike. Seismographs recorded vibrations consistent with a low-yield underwater explosive detonation at the moment the ship went down. Whatever caused those explosions, external attack, sabotage, or catastrophic system failure, the result was the same. Ursa Major sank on 23 December at 23:22 UTC at position 36 degrees 27 minutes, 30.0 north, 0 degrees 53 minutes 26.4 west, between Aguilas in Spain and Oran in Algeria. Strategic cargo worth millions, potentially containing components for North Korea's nuclear program, now sits 2,500 meters below the surface. And Russia's response reveals how seriously they take the loss. In January 2025, the Russian intelligence vessel Yantar arrived at the site of the Ursa Major, sinking to conduct an underwater investigation. The presence on board of Rear Admiral Alexander Konovalov, commander of the 29th Special Purpose Submarine Brigade, indicated the seriousness of the inquiry. The Yantar is widely regarded in Western naval analysis as a dual-use intelligence platform equipped with deep-sea submersibles. Russia deployed a specialized intelligence ship and submarine forces commander, not to recover crew, but to manage what's left of classified cargo on the seabed. This is 180 degrees opposite to how the United States Navy operates strategic logistics. American military sea lift doesn't rely on secrecy. It relies on transparency, redundancy, and overwhelming protective capability. United States cargo ships broadcast AIS, Automatic Identification System, continuously. They operate under convoy protection with destroyer escorts when necessary. And they coordinate through NATO interoperability networks that share tracking data across allied forces in real time. The philosophy is fundamentally different. Russia tried to hide one ship carrying strategic cargo through name changes and falsified manifests. The United States operates hundreds of logistics vessels openly, protected by air cover, surface escorts, and submarine screens. When adversaries know exactly where American supply ships are but cannot attack them without triggering overwhelming response, deterrence works better than concealment. Modern ISR makes hiding obsolete. Aerial images revealed two large, undeclared containers at the stern, despite Russia's attempts to mask cargo contents. Space-based synthetic aperture radar detects ships regardless of whether they broadcast AIS. Satellite constellations providing near-continuous global coverage track vessel movements across oceans. And signal intelligence triangulates electronic emissions from navigation systems, communications equipment, and radar, all of which commercial cargo ships must operate to safely traverse international waters. The Ursa Major thought it could operate as a ghost. But here's what satellite surveillance actually saw. A vessel departing St. Petersburg on an unusual route through the Mediterranean, rather than the northern sea route typically used for Vladivostok-bound cargo. A ship with declared cargo that didn't match observed hull displacement. Large containers secured on deck that weren't on any manifest. Course corrections consistent with covert destination changes. And ultimately, a catastrophic loss in international waters while carrying cargo that violated multiple sanctions regimes. Logistics security is a silent front in modern strategy. The ship's owner, Oberon Logistica, is a known Russian military contractor described as part of the Russian Defense Ministry's military construction operations. Built in 2009, the vessel, together with its owner, was placed under sanctions by the United States in March 2022, after the Kremlin launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This wasn't a random cargo ship. This was Russia's primary military logistics vessel, designated as the Oberon Logistica flagship, responsible for moving strategic equipment across theaters. And peer adversaries will target strategic logistics lines precisely because they're vulnerable. Combat ships have defenses, close-in weapon systems, electronic warfare suites, escort vessels providing layered protection. But cargo ships? Even military logistics vessels operate with minimal defensive armament. They rely on not being detected, not being targeted, and not being engaged. The Ursa Major's loss demonstrates that all three assumptions are false in modern contested waters. Contrast that with United States Navy logistics doctrine. Protected sea lift routes established through regional alliances. Convoys guarded by destroyers and submarines when operating in potentially contested zones. Combat air patrols providing overhead coverage for high-value logistics movements. And most critically, the assumption that adversaries know where American supply ships are, making defensive planning overt rather than relying on concealment that satellite surveillance renders impossible. The greatest vulnerability isn't the ship itself. It's the assumption that secrecy makes it safe. Russia believed falsified manifests, name changes, and unusual routing would protect the Ursa Major. Instead, those very anomalies flagged the vessel for enhanced scrutiny. Intelligence agencies specifically watch for ships that behave unusually, because unusual behavior indicates something worth hiding. And in the age of persistent satellite surveillance, unusual behavior is impossible to conceal. The sinking exposed Russia's strategic transport network as fundamentally inadequate for peer competition. Since sanctions in 2022, the Ursa Major has made frequent trips to Syria, transporting military equipment. Ukrainian intelligence claimed the ship was actually headed to Syria to evacuate Russian forces following Assad's fall. Spanish investigators believe it carried nuclear components to North Korea. The truth might be both. Multi-purpose strategic cargo moved through a single exposed logistics vessel because Russia lacks the capability to protect multiple supply lines simultaneously. The United States operates entirely differently. The Military Sealift Command controls approximately 125 ships providing global logistics support. Those vessels don't hide. They operate openly with full protective escorts when necessary. And adversaries know that attacking American military sealift means engaging not just cargo ships, but the escorts, air cover, and submarine forces protecting them. Escalation that makes the attack prohibitively costly, regardless of the target's value. The Ursa Major sinking teaches a lesson for peer conflict. Logistics is warfare, and logistics must be protected like combat operations. Because adversaries don't just target warships. They target supply chains, material movements, and strategic transport. And vessels that think they can hide in the age of persistent surveillance are the first to die. Ghost ships don't exist. The Ursa Major proved it. And every Navy planning strategic logistics for future conflict faces the same choice. Operate openly with adequate protection, or operate covertly and discover that modern ISR makes secrecy an illusion. Russia chose secrecy. They lost a flagship vessel, strategic cargo, and 2 crew members. That's not operational security. That's vulnerability disguised as stealth. And in modern naval warfare, the difference is measured in ships that reach their destination versus ships that sink trying to hide.